Good morning, my math wizards. All right, today we're going to go over lesson 2-1, and that's one-step equations. Okay, so take a moment, hit pause, and make sure that you copy everything right here. Copy it all down. Now, our first step is we have to identify what is happening to the variable, or we like to call it x, a, whatever, but we have to identify what's happening with it. Now remember, there's only 4 operations: addition, subtraction, times, and division. Okay, so here I have an x plus 4. So obviously that's going to be addition. We see the plus sign. X minus 2, subtraction, because we can see the minus sign. What's happening to this variable right here, because you don't see any signs, but whenever you have something this close, like 2x, that automatically means multiplication. But a lot of us forget that. So remember, if two things are really close together, it's times. So multiplication. You just have to remember that's what we do now. We don't use the little dot. We don't use the little x to show times. We put the two objects close together. So that means times. And then here's the most difficult one for us. All right? And I'm sorry, you're going to just have to accept this. If you see a variable on the top and a number on the bottom, it looks like a fraction, but it actually means division. All right? And again, we're not going to be using the division sign anymore. We're going to be showing what looks to be a fraction, or the x on top of a number. And that number that it's on top of is dividing. So what's happening to the x? It's being divided into 4 parts. Okay, so that's division, right? So if you cannot tell what's going on in the problem, then you can't solve it, right? And that's like real life. If you don't know what's wrong, how do you know how to fix it? You don't, right? So you have to know what's going on. So addition is easy to see, so is subtraction. Times gets a little bit harder, and a lot of us forget that this is division, all right? So once you have these straight, then you can come over to here. Now, what do? Well, you have your operations, right? That's the happening part, right? We have addition. That's the operation. Right? Well, then we have this fancy word called inverse, which just means opposite, right? What's the opposite of that operation? Well, if you have addition or adding, the opposite of adding is minus, right? Or subtraction. Times, the opposite is division. Now, if you take a look, my arrow is going in both directions. This is like a two-way street, right? So if you have minus, guess what the opposite of minus is? Addition. If you start with division, guess what the opposite is? That's right. I knew you guys were math wizards. It's multiplication or times, all right? So you have to identify what's going on with the variable, right? The variable, of course, is our letter of the alphabet. Once you identify what's going on, then we can use the inverses, the opposite operations, to start solving the problem. Okay, time to get ready to do more copying. I got to step out of the way because of the projector. I need you to make sure that you copy down this table. Make sure this one says equation with problem in parentheses. This states operation, or what's happening. And then we have our inverse, or it looks like a cutoff, but that says inverse or the opposite. Okay, it's very clear. So take a moment, copy down everything that you see right here, and then I'll explain it. All right, so what I put, we have an equation, right? We have an x plus a 2 equals a 6. We have an x minus an 8 equals negative 14. We have a 4x, which means what? That's right, times. 4x times x equals 9. And then here, it's a little bit harder to see. This is a 14. So I should say x over 14. If you can't see that, x over 14. And that should equal a negative 2. So, what's happening, right? Well, in the first one, it's pretty easy. It's adding 2. The next one, subtracting 8. This is times 4. That's what's happening to the x. And this x, even though it's still hard to see, we're dividing by what? 14. Okay? So, my next step is, what's the opposite of this? Because you're going to need the opposite or the inverse to figure that out. So we have a minus 2, right? That's what it would look like. Minus 2 or negative 2. Add 8, because that's the opposite of subtracting. So that would be a plus 8. Times 4, we have divide 4. I just showed the divide symbol here. And then we have a times 14 is the opposite of divide. And so I do is I put 14 inside the parentheses. So what I'm going to do is, where it says number 1, I'm going to fill in these 2 blank boxes. The rest of the green boxes you must fill in before you get the worksheet for this lesson. So this is going to be all of your practice work that you're going to have to do. So here is the first box. It says x minus 7 equals negative 1. So what is the operation? Well, I have a minus 7. What is the opposite or the inverse of minus 7? Add 7. And then that usually looks like this, plus 7, and you'll see how we're going to be doing this to both sides. So it is now your job to go through, look at these clues. Over here you have to write the equation. But just look up here. Remember, if it says subtracting 8 and add 8, what does it look like? Well, it looks like x minus 8. So use these clues up here. Use my clue, but go ahead and finish the rest of these boxes. All right, now that you're done copying down that table and filling in all the blanks, we're going to be working on these 4 problems. I would probably just write down 1 or 2 at a time, but go ahead and copy them down. All right, so now we're going to go and we're going to solve these. So on example 1, you have to, again, identify what's happening to the x. Well, we have a minus 5. All right, so you can all see that. We have a minus 5. That's what's happening. Minus 5. So to solve this equation, we have to do the opposite. We have to, what's the opposite of minus? Add. So you're going to put down add 5. So we're going to use that inverse. So we're going to come over here. We're going to go plus 5. And you're going to start hearing me say both sides. When I say mean both sides, you have an equal sign. That equal sign is like a fence or a street. There's this side of the street, then there's this side of the street. If you go plus 5, you must do it to the other side. So there's my plus 5. I'm going to come over here and go plus 5. Now, why do we use the inverse of the opposites? Because a minus 5 and a plus 5 make 0, 0, right? 0. So these cancel out. The x falls down. Now we can put down our equal sign. Is the x isolated? Is it by itself? If it is, you're done. Okay? If the x is all by itself, you have solved the problem. That will never change. So over here, we have to do this little bit of math. So use your calculator, go 5 plus 5, and you get 10, right? And that's simply called simplify, which just means basically solve. Right? So you see how we use the opposite? Now, again, come down to example number 2. We have a negative 4, but what's this operation? Times. Oh, you guys are so smart. Equals 20. So what I want you to do first is draw that little fence line. Draw this underneath it, right? Looks like a balance beam almost. So again, what is the opposite of times? Divide. So you can go divide. Now be careful. That's a negative 4. I'm still going to divide by a negative 4. Divide by a negative 4. Not subtract, divide. And sometimes you'll see me put a little line like this. Why? Because again, if you see a line, it looks like a fraction, the top number is being divided by the bottom. So again, what is this? This is division. Why are we using division? Because we started with times. And this is the opposite. So again, negative 4 divided by negative 4 makes 1. 1x. That's all it means. 4 divided by negative 4 is 1x. So you don't even put the 1, just put x. Why? Because, can you see it? It's 1x. You don't have to put a 1 in front of it. Drop down the equal sign. Now, be careful. Use your calculator. Don't forget that little negative sign. So if you go 20 divided by a negative 4, you will get a negative 5. Okay? Remember, we're isolating the variable, which means getting it by itself. Like me on Friday night, I'm isolated. I'm all by myself, just like the x. All right? That's what you want to do. So, over here, on example 3, what's the operation? Addition. What is the opposite of addition? That's right, minus. So, I'm going to come over here and go minus 7. Oops, forgot my street. Do my balance beam. Do that first. So I go minus 7 on the other side, cross the street. Always cross that equal sign. Go minus 7. Again, why do we use opposites or inverses? Because a plus 7 and a minus 7 make 0, and 0 cancels out, leaving me with an x. Drop down my equal sign, and then in your calculator, be very careful, type in negative 10, and you can say plus negative 7. You got to make sure you type in 2 negatives.
Good morning, Tri.
So when we have 2 negatives, remember, same team, add them up. That's going to give us a negative 17. And again, what are we looking at? We're looking at starting with addition. The opposite of adding was the subtract. Alright? So again, opposite functions are inverse. Now let's look at number 4, the one that no one likes to do. Again, it's because people don't recognize. What is this? Division. Division. X is being cut into 2. It's being divided by 2. That's what this means. It means division. So what's the opposite of division? Times. Watch how I show times. Very important. I'm going to rewrite the problem. There's my x being divided by 2. There's my 4. Watch how I show times. I'm going to put, now again, if it's being divided by 2, that means to solve it, I have to times by 2. Watch how I show times. Remember the little parentheses? Alright, this means times now. We're not using the little dot symbol. Remember, if I put 2 things close together, that means times. Now, a lot of people start doing 2 times 2. No. Did you go 7 plus 7 and make 14? No. What happened? They canceled out. What happened over here? What happened to the 2 negative 4s? They canceled out. Why? Because that's what opposite operations do. So when you come over here, guess what this times 2 and the divide 2 are going to happen? That's right. They're going to cancel out. Leaving the x all by itself. Come over here. Now here, this is where you do the multiplication because there's nothing to cancel out the 2. Now you do 8. Alright, so don't forget this one. Alright, so go ahead and remember, fill in the table and start this lesson. Have a math-tastic day.